This is the Audiophile and Headphones Iceberg. Hi, my name is Tenshin Sound. I'm an audio YouTuber who makes silly little videos about headphones and other audio playback devices. Hello, hi. Yes, I know, I'm a VTuber. If that makes you uncomfortable, I don't know what to tell you, get over it. Audio is a passion of mine, and I love anything and everything that plays, records, produces, or is otherwise related to the subject of music and sound production. I've been enjoying Iceberg meme videos for a long time, and I decided I wanted to try my hand at making one. So what better way to combine both of my interests than making an Iceberg video about audiophile stuff? Audio is an entire rabbit hole, and there are people out there who may be discovering my channel for the first time and probably haven't given much thought about the devices they use to listen to music on a daily basis. You know, about how they work and all the characteristics that make up their sound. Hopefully this video might interest some new people into getting into the hobby, or at the very least encourage you to listen to more music. I highly recommend listening to more music. You know, it's something that's actually really good for you. If you don't know what an Iceberg meme is, it's a chart that organizes various subjects relating to a particular category according to their obscurity. More well-known entries are at the top, and the further down it goes, the more obscure they become. You got Iceberg memes for things like Super Mario 64, Minecraft, movies, serial killers, conspiracy theories. This is an Iceberg chart that I found on Reddit on the r/headphones subreddit by a user whose account has since been deleted, RIP anonymous Reddit user. I'm gonna try and go over most of these, but some of these entries just kind of read like memes. They're also pretty self-explanatory and don't require a lot of research, so some of those entries I've replaced with other ones that I thought would be more interesting, or I just omitted them entirely. I feel like this entry listens to cheap IEMs or earbuds most of the time anyway, doesn't really need a whole lot of explaining. I've also made a few changes to the placement of certain entries. I think some of the placements on this iceberg don't fit with the tier they were assigned. The tiers themselves I'm also not a big fan of, as they seem to focus less on the experience of audio hobbyists and more just on gear ownership, and I just disagree with that. Just wanted to make this disclaimer before we dive in. You know, I've changed the order to more reflect my personal opinions on how this chart should work. One more disclaimer, you might hear me say audiophiles dislike this item for XYZ reason. Please don't think this means it's a bad product. Audiophiles are snobby people who have the luxury of using really high fidelity devices, so their point of view may differ vastly from someone who's not familiar with the community. Though some items on this iceberg do actually kinda suck. Tier 1 is known as the normie tier, so the entries are well-known audio subjects that people who aren't into the hobby will definitely recognize. And without further ado, let's dive in. Buying headphones for looks and/or features. This entry refers to people who make a purchase based on what features a headphone has and/or how it looks. Most consumers prioritize convenience, comfort, and aesthetics over sound quality. If a headphone is comfortable and has easy integration with phones, along with having stuff like transparency mode, active noise canceling, EQ, battery life, etc., consumers are fine if the sound quality isn't premium so long as it's listenable. Having a look that's pleasing is important to a lot of consumers as well. Choosing a headphone based on looks and features is how the majority of people buy headphones. Hi-Fi. Hi-Fi is an abbreviation for high fidelity. It basically means any audio device that plays high-quality sound. There's high-fidelity speaker amps, car stereos, and headphones. And there's also high-quality portable listening devices called DAPs that I'll talk about later. But yeah, it's all hi-fi. Some devices will even have a little sticker on them that looks like this to communicate to consumers that it's a high-fidelity device. But a lot of the time, this sticker is just for marketing purposes. I recommend doing research before buying any piece of gear. Hi-fi used to refer exclusively to home stereo systems. People often use them with vinyl record players and then later CDs. But digital formats and advances in mobile technology has allowed us to have high-quality audio playback devices in much smaller and portable form factors. So hi-fi has kind of become a catch-all term to mean anything that plays high-res audio. Sony. Sony manufactures a lot of electronics, including headphones, earbuds, speakers, and amplifiers. While Sony's more consumer-grade headphones and earbuds like the XM4s and LinkBuds S are really well known, Sony also produces headphones for studio use as well as for audiophiles. Many of these models are well regarded in the audiophile community. A well-known studio headphone Sony produces is the MDR7506. It originally released back in 1991 and is still an industry staple today. Sony also has a tendency to have really elaborate and sometimes difficult to remember naming conventions for a lot of their devices, such as the Sony WH-1000XM5 or the WF-CH500. And of course, we can't forget about the MDR Z7M2. Seriously, like 90% of Sony's products have names like this, and it makes them really hard to remember. Sony's also the pioneer of portable listening devices, releasing the first Walkman back in 1979, and they still make great portable listening products today. Beats by Dre. Beats by Dre is a popular headphone brand that was founded by rapper Dr. Dre and industry mogul Jimmy Iovine in 2006. Beats became popular due to their marketing. Rather than try to advertise their sound quality, Beats were marketed as though they were more of a fashion statement instead of as a piece of equipment. They had a lot of celebrity endorsement, and their marketing campaigns were incredibly successful. Though Beats are kind of a meme in the audiophile community, as they were tuned to have an obscene amount of bass, which tends to muddy up recordings, and they did garner a reputation for being really bassy. A lot of people realized that Beats focused more on marketing and how they look instead of how they sound, so they're often associated with average consumers who don't really know anything about audio. They also tend to be a bit overpriced. Audiophiles will often cite Beats as an example of a headphone with bad tuning, and compare other headphones with significant bass to Beats. It's just bass is a common phrase used when talking about Beats in audiophile circles. Though it seems even regular consumers later on began to realize that Beats didn't sound all that good, and were more of a fashion statement than anything else. In 2014, Apple actually bought Beats, and in recent years they seem to be attempting to fix Beats' reputation as a super bassy fashion accessory, and the frequency response graphs of their more recent earbuds seem to reflect this, as they display more balanced sound profiles than previous models. Newer Beats models are being made with Apple's technology, so it does seem like they are improving. Beats Studio Buds in particular are a massive improvement over their older products, which is evident by their frequency response graphs, though they're still not perfect. But I'm pretty optimistic for the future of the brand. YouTube to MP3 converters. YouTube to MP3 converters, a certified hood classic. This entry refers to websites that convert YouTube videos into MP3 files that the user could then download. Back in the day, these websites were a means of online piracy, as they allowed users to take music videos uploaded to YouTube and then use these MP3 converters to download the song DRM free to avoid paying for a digital copy. Often the files would be significantly compressed and have very poor audio quality. I myself actually used to use these websites to get music when I was a younger kid and didn't have money to spend on music. I'd spend hours scouring YouTube and using these sites and then porting the files to my shitty little MP3 player to take to school and listen to during study hall. These sites also have a lot of ads and sometimes malware, so I probably gave the family computer a few viruses on numerous occasions. Aw man, good times. This one's making me nostalgic. Active noise cancellation. Active noise cancellation, or ANC, refers to the process of electronically muting outside noise. It's a feature that's often found on a lot of Bluetooth earbuds and headphones. This process works using a series of internal microphones and speakers. A microphone gathers the information on the outside noise, and then an internal processor analyzes that noise, and then uses the speaker inside the earbud or headphone to generate opposite sound waves, thus canceling the noise. It's really cool technology, and it's basically become a standard feature on wireless earbuds and headphones. Bose headphones and earbuds in particular have some of the best active noise canceling technology that I have personally tried, and a lot of people seem to agree that Bose noise cancellation is very good. Vinyl. Vinyl is one of the earliest methods of recording and reproducing audio, and for decades, it was the dominant way we listened to music. When the record spins, a needle is placed on the grooves of the record, which moves a small magnet inside a coil of wire. This produces an electric current that's then run through an amplifier and then to your headphones or speakers to produce the sound. CDs and digital music caused a dramatic shift in how people listen, though vinyl records in recent years have made a comeback, as it has a really unique sound characteristic from other forms of audio that simply can't be replicated. Many people today still prefer the analog feel of a vinyl playback over digital media. I will say, vinyl is really cool, and if you haven't heard it before, I highly recommend giving it a try. One of my roommates in college brought his record player with him to our dorm room, and we regularly listened to Us Three's Hand on the Torch album on vinyl during our study sessions. That album is killer, by the way. Go listen to it. I talk more about it, but sadly, it's not an entry on the iceberg. Now, to answer the question, does vinyl sound better? Honestly, it's just preference. Vinyl just has a different vibe, and the only way to know is to try it. Surround sound. Surround sound is a sound production technique that creates the sensation that sound is traveling around your room to make the sound more realistic. People often have surround sound for their home theater systems to enhance the experience of watching TV and movies. People really enjoy the sound for watching movies and TV because it just better immerses people in the experience. In order to use surround sound, you need a device that's compatible. You need some kind of processor that's able to convert the audio into surround sound and then send it to the corresponding speaker that sound is associated with. Typically, this would be a receiver that goes from your TV to your speakers. Some gaming headsets will also come with a USB dongle that will convert their PC audio into surround sound. Good bass. My guess is this entry is an audiophile's attempt at mocking consumers who decide whether or not a headphone sounds good based upon how much bass is there. A lot of headphones aimed at average consumers tend to have a bass-heavy sound signature, and people really like bass. So people will give these headphones a listen for the first time and just immediately note that it has good bass because it's something they look for. Though I understand why people like bass so much. It's impactful, rumbly, it's fun, and it's the only instrument that forms both the foundation of the harmony and keeps the tempo of the song at the same time. It makes sense that people might want a lot of it. Bose. Bose is a well-known audio device manufacturer who produces everything from noise-canceling headphones and earbuds to car speakers, portable Bluetooth speakers, and home theater systems. Some people might recognize them as the people who make those TV sound bars. Their products tend to be pretty accessible and feature-rich, which makes them really popular with many consumers outside the audiophile hobby. The noise canceling on their earbuds and wireless headphones is also really good. Though many audiophiles aren't fans of their sound quality, they typically go for a bassy sound signature that's typical of products aimed towards more average consumers. M50X. The Audio-Technica M50X is a really popular headphone, and for most people, it's one of the first headphones they think of or see when they want to get into more serious audio gear. I have a video on the M50X if you want my full opinion on it, which I'll link in the description. But the TLDR is, it's a really popular headphone among content creators due to its durability, portability, and good noise isolation, though its sound quality doesn't quite live up to the hype that surrounds it. But for a lot of people who get into the hobby, this is like their first serious headphone or piece of gear, so it has a place as a gateway to the rest of the hobby. It's not a bad headphone despite the amount of smack audiophiles like to talk about it, and if somebody tries to talk down to you because you like a headphone, then pay them no mind. They're just upset that you found joy in a place that they couldn't. True wireless. It's a phrase that simply means the audio device you're listening to operates via a Bluetooth connection and without the use of wires. Apple AirPods Pros, Samsung Galaxy Buds, Bose QCs are all examples of true wireless devices. Raycon. If you've ever watched YouTube at any point, you've probably heard about Raycon. They're another producer of earbuds and wireless headphones and were founded in 2017 by R&B artist Ray J. In the audiophile hobby, they're also a meme for similar reasons as Beats by Dre. They sponsor YouTubers to talk about them all the time and invest heavily into their marketing, which also seems to work quite effectively, as I see these earbuds pretty frequently when I'm just out in public. I certainly think there are much better alternatives on the market right now that are far more affordable and sound better. If you like your Raycons, that's great, but there's a fair amount of data that more or less shows that the sound of Raycons is not very good, and like Beats, they invest more into their marketing than making the earbuds sound good. I do have a strange personal anecdote about Raycons. Anytime I talk about Raycons to my friends who aren't into the audiophile hobby, typically I'm talking about them negatively because I don't like them, I usually get the response, well, yeah, maybe they don't sound the best, but hey, they're cheap. And no, actually, they're not. A lot of people think they're cheap, but if you straight up purchase them from the Raycon website, their base model, the E25 Everyday Buds, are like $80, and they get more expensive from there. If you're a little upset that I said Raycons don't sound good, I'm sorry, but on the flip side, just know that your music can sound so much better for a lot cheaper. Also, their earlier products were just rebranded cheap $20 Chinese earbuds that they sold at an insane markup, but shush, don't tell Ray J I said that. Amazon reviews. This entry just refers to how many people will only read Amazon reviews for products before buying them without doing any other research. Just out of curiosity, I did read some Amazon reviews for a few well-regarded audio devices, and there were actually some pretty in-depth and insightful ones that people wrote, so I thought that was pretty cool. Tier 2 is known as the newbie tier. So this is the tier for people who are curious about the hobby and are open to the idea of better sound quality. Here we'll cover some terms that are essential for getting into the hobby, as well as some entries that were thrown in for fun. Stereo imaging. Stereo means that you have two separate audio channels, one channel for right and one channel for left. This is different from mono, which uses a single channel resulting in the same audio in both left and right. If you want to get a good idea of stereo versus mono, a good song to use is Jimi Hendrix's Voodoo Child. It uses stereo recording to make his guitar pan left and right, and it's really cool. John Coltrane's Giant Steps is another early stereo recording. If you listen to this chart in stereo, half the band is going to be in one ear and the other half is going to be in the other, but you'll hear the full band in both ears if you listen to mono. Open back headphones. Open back headphones are exactly what they sound like. They have open backs on the ear cups that allow sound to pass through. The benefit of this is they allow for better sound staging and imaging. Though, because they allow sound to pass through, they're better suited to being used in quiet rooms, as they offer virtually no noise isolation. Please do not use open back headphones in public because everyone will hate you. Like, they bleed noise like you wouldn't believe. In-ear monitors. In-ear monitors, or IEMs, are quickly becoming a really popular way to listen to music. They're wired earphones that have a tip that's inserted into a person's ear canal. They're very portable and have fantastic isolation, which makes them ideal for listening on the go. I own a few pairs of IEMs myself, and I absolutely love them. They used to be more used by stage musicians to both protect their hearing and monitor the music while they're performing, but fairly recently, audio brands began making in-ear monitors specifically for listening to music for enjoyment. In the past 2 years in particular, the IEM market has gotten really competitive, and it moves at lightning speeds, especially with chi-fi brands exploding onto the scene. Seriously, it's like as soon as a new IEM releases, people in the community are already calling it irrelevant. Many IEMs offer very good sound for objectively great value, so they're a good option for people on a tight budget. Plus, their small size and isolation from outside noises makes them ideal for listening on the go. Sony Walkman. The original Sony Walkman was released in 1979 and was a portable cassette player. Many people recognize the Walkman as one of the most iconic audio players of all time, along with the iPod. The Walkman is important for basically making portable audio mainstream and has been part of pop culture for decades now. Later, they came out with the Discman, which were portable CD players once CDs took off in the 90s. And today, Sony makes digital audio players that still have the Walkman name. According to Design Museum, the original Walkman was based on the Pressman, a tape recorder that was released in the year before. Sony co-founder Masaru Ibuka wanted a device that would allow him to listen to music on airplanes. This inspired the creation of the Walkman. The Walkman sold approximately 50,000 units in its first 2 months, and from 1979 to 2009, over 358 million products with the Walkman name have been sold. It is perhaps the most influential music player ever created, right up there next to the vinyl record player. Dynamic drivers. A dynamic driver is probably what you picture when you're thinking of a speaker in your head. Those cones in a speaker or headphone that vibrate to make the sound? Yeah, it's those things. These work through the use of a magnet, a coil of wire known as a voice coil, and a circular-shaped membrane that can be made out of a variety of materials, such as paper, ceramics, or plastic. When electricity is run through the coil of wire, it interacts with the magnetic field produced by the magnet. This causes the circular membrane to move back and forth, thus pushing the air around and producing sound waves. FLACs. Some digital audio file types are compressed to use up less storage space, but as a result, they lose some of their sound quality. MP3 files are an example of a compressed file type. FLAC files are also compressed files, however, FLAC files are lossless, meaning that no data is lost in the recording, but the file is still compressed to take up less space. This is unlike a WAV file, which is a simple, raw, uncompressed file that takes up a lot more storage space. The good news is, WAV and FLAC files are virtually identical in terms of sound quality. So, if you don't have a lot of storage, you're better off with a FLAC file. And yes, with both FLAC and WAV files, the quality is noticeably much better than MP3s. As a general idea, take a look at the bitrate and sample rate. Generally, the higher the bitrate and sample rate, the better the sound quality is gonna be. Bitrates in layman's terms is just how much information is able to be communicated, with a bit being a unit of digital information. So, to get really technical, the bit rate is used to represent the amount of bits that are in 1 second of audio, and the sample rate is the amount of samples of audio taken per second. Frequency response. It's the amount of bass, mids, and treble headphones or speakers have when playing an audio recording. Frequency response is often depicted on graphs that look like this. It's a visual representation of how a headphone sounds compared against some sort of target curve. On the x-axis is frequency or pitch. On the y-axis is how loud it is. It goes bass to treble from from left to right. The higher the line, the louder that frequency is. Frequency response is often referred to by audiophiles as the objective aspect of a device's sound, as this is something people can actually measure and get tangible data on. It's also often referred to as tuning. It's also the aspect of the device's sound that's going to be the most immediately apparent when a person listens. Now, personal preference is ultimately going to trump the hard measurements, but it can give you an idea of what a headphone or speaker could sound like when you use it. But of course, the best way to know if you like something is to give it a try. V-shaped tuning. So now that I've explained frequency response, I can explain V-shaped tuning. Basically, it means a headphone or speaker has extra bass and extra treble. This is different from neutral tuning, which has about the same amount of bass and treble throughout the entire frequency response. An extreme example of V-shaped tuning is actually Raycon earbuds. Like, look at this graph. Kinda looks like a V, doesn't it? People like the sound signature because it sounds exciting, and a lot of consumer-grade products have this kind of tuning, though gear aimed towards audiophiles can have this sound signature as well. EQ. EQ, or equalization, is the practice of using software, or in some cases certain hardware, to change the frequency response to your headphones or speakers. You can use EQ to basically tweak how the sound comes out of the device you're listening to. Like your headphones but wish they had more bass? Boom, EQ. Want more treble? Boom, EQ. You have people who absolutely swear by EQ, but you also have people who are strictly against EQ. I personally like to use EQ because it allows me to kind of tweak a headphone's frequency response to meet my exact specific preference. People who are anti-EQ will often say things like, oh, just buy a headphone you already like the sound of, which, hey, you know, sure, good point. Another thing about EQ though, is it can't always fix a headphone that sounds bad, but it can make a headphone that sounds generally pretty good sound even better. Use EQ if you want to, or don't. Audio is a highly personal experience. Just, you know, listen to your music. DankPods. DankPods is an audio and tech YouTuber from Australia who makes videos from a top-down perspective, mostly only showing his hands on top of his desk against his signature green iPad. He makes content that mainly focuses on headphones and handheld technology. Plus, he's known for being a pretty funny guy. Often he showcases what he calls nuggets, which is a term he uses to refer to any small handheld electronic device, in addition to his videos about headphones. Nuggets can be basically anything from cheap bootleg MP3 players to old cell phones and laptops to even his cars. Basically, any janky tech featured on his videos is a nugget. Other running jokes from his channel include calling the Sennheiser HD600 the Herder 600s, and his collection of PK Cell brand batteries, which he calls Puxcell. One of my favorite recurring themes on DankPod's videos is when he smashes any bad knockoff piece of tech that irritates him with a rock that he labeled One Grit. I never thought I'd laugh at a sandpaper joke, but man, do I cackle like an idiot when I watch One Grit decimate cheap tech. He's a really great content creator. Like, he's really just good at talking about stuff, and I could listen to him talk about literally anything, and you should definitely check him out. He's a funny guy. Beyerdynamic. Beyerdynamic is an audio manufacturer from Germany who are known for making studio headphones and were founded in 1924 in Berlin, and today they're actually the world's oldest still active audio company. Happy 100 years, Beyerdynamic. Before they made headphones, they actually made speakers for cinemas and released their first headphones, the DT48, in 1937. Today, they also make microphones and wireless audio systems in addition to headphones, but in the audiophile hobby, they're more known for their headphones. They're a little divisive in the community today, as they tend to have a lot of treble, which some people really like, others not so much. Some of their more popular headphones include the DT770, DT1990 Pro, and the T1. I myself own a Beyerdynamic DT770, and I quite like it. And I've also tried the DT1990 Pro as well, and I thought it sounded excellent, even if the treble is a little bit spicy. Beyerdynamic headphones also tend to have really sturdy build quality and last for a long time. They've been around forever and are well regarded by both audiophiles and studio musicians that like to use them for mixing and recording. If you watch streamers or music YouTubers, there's a good chance you've seen the DT770 or the open back DT990 being used. Headphone amplifiers. Some headphones are inefficient, so you need more power in order for these headphones to sound right. Headphone amplifiers give you more power so you can properly enjoy it. Technically, any device device that plays music that you'd plug a headphone into has an amplifier, because you need something to amplify that electronic signal that a headphone or speaker converts into sound, but this entry is specifically referring to external headphone amplifiers. Some headphones and speakers need more power than others. Headphone amplifiers just take a low electric signal and raise it to a greater level so you can listen to your music on these more inefficient headphones. You don't always need an external amplifier, but some headphones can be more power hungry than others. The AKG K340, for example, is a notoriously difficult headphone to power, though a lot of the more affordable headphone amps on the market can power like 90% of headphones. Ideally, a headphone amp should have a really neutral sound and have very little distortion, so it shouldn't change the sound of your headphone too much, though some headphone amps can slightly change the sound. I myself have a few headphone amps, as they come in a variety of sizes and have additional features besides just giving you more power. Fun fact, the Apple dongle actually has a little amplifier inside of it, which if you're not into audio, you probably didn't know. Impedance and sensitivity. These are both measures of a headphone's efficiency. If you want to get an idea of how much power you'll need to drive a headphone or IEM, pay attention to their impedance and sensitivity. Impedance is a measure of electrical resistance measured in ohms. The higher the impedance, the harder they are to drive. For example, the Sennheiser HD800 is 300 ohms and will require an external amplifier to drive. Sensitivity is a measurement of how loud a headphone will be at any given level, measured in decibels per milliwatt. The sensitivity of the HD800 is 102 decibels per milliwatt. As a general rule, any headphone that has an impedance of 100 or greater might require a more powerful amp than your PC's onboard sound card, and any headphone with a sensitivity of 98 decibels per milliwatt may require a more powerful amp. So the higher the ohms, the more power needed, and the lower the decibels, the more power needed. Critical. Critical is a YouTuber, website owner, and now audio retailer based out of Singapore. He's a very prominent figure in the audiophile hobby, known for his expansive database of headphone and IEM measurements called In-Ear Fidelity, along with his review videos on YouTube. He's also known for collaborating with various audio brands on products, many of which are well-liked. Some collaborations include the Moondrop Blessing 2 Dusk, the Truth Ear Zero, and the 7Hz Dioko. He's a very well-respected member of the audio community because of all the work that he's done in providing measurements and helping to release some of the most well-regarded in-ear monitors on the market today. However, as of 2024, Critical has officially retired from making reviews in order to focus on his new retail business, Hangout Audio. Critical has also announced that he is no longer updating his ranking list or measurements database, although they are still available. Thank you, Crin, for all the great reviews and measurements you provided for us. I'm happy to see you chasing your calling, man. I'll leave a link to Hangout Audio in the description. Linus Tech Tips. A lot of people who watch YouTube are probably familiar with Linus and his company, Linus Media Group. He's a really big tech YouTuber who typically makes videos about PCs and other tech products, including headphones. I think he's an entry on this list because in 2022, Linus Media Group purchased a $50,000 headphone measurement rig as a part of their measurement lab to assist them in their reviews. Also, he daily drives a Sennheiser HD600. Grado Labs. Grado Labs is a headphone manufacturer based out of New York. They're known for making open back headphones that are on-ear rather than over-ear. They're also a really divisive brand in the audiophile hobby due to their headphones having really sketchy build quality, being uncomfortable, and having pretty impractical designs. I cannot stand the super chunky cables they put on their headphones. Like, why? This is the opposite of peak design. They also develop headphones without the use of frequency response measurements and tune their products entirely by ear. Now, I know what you're thinking. These sound like the worst headphones ever. How are they still in business? Well, there are still a huge amount of people who really like how they sound. I actually own a pair of Grado SR325Xs, and I can basically confirm that all the stuff about their comfort and build quality is true. But my Grados actually sound very good, and while I can't wear them for very long, that short time I spend listening is absolutely heavenly. Grados have kind of a cult fan base. People who are into Grados actually really like them because they just do a lot of things differently from other audio brands. And I will say, Grado headphones look really freaking cool. Though, be careful with Grados, as some of their products are notorious for having a lot of treble which some people aren't going to like, and also the aforementioned comfort and build quality issues. As with any product, please do your research before you buy. SHP 9500. The Philips SHP 9500 is a popular open-back headphone manufactured by Philips that's a popular, budget-friendly open-back headphone. It's known for its neutral tuning and high efficiency, and that makes it really popular for people who are just getting into the hobby. This is probably one of the most hyped up audiophile headphones along with the Audio-Technica M50X. I personally have tried the SHP 9500 and I wasn't that big of a fan of it, but lots of listeners quite enjoy this headphone. It's one of the few headphones for under $100 that has a decent tuning. It has a bit of a bump in the bass and a clear mid-range. What I personally wasn't a fan of though was the lower treble. It can sound a bit harsh if you listen to music genres like rock and metal because they tend to have a lot of cymbals and, you know, an emphasis in the low mid-range combined with lots of cymbals is not a great sound. It is one of the better sounding headphones in the under $100 price range though. DMS. DMS is a tech review YouTuber from the United States who makes videos that are very well produced. He's also a frequent face on the Headphone Show YouTube channel, which is the official channel for headphones.com. He's a very knowledgeable and well-respected member of the community. His reviews are excellent and I highly recommend them. DAPs. DAPs are like the next evolution in MP3 players. DAP stands for Digital Audio Player. Technically, any player that plays digital music files could be called a DAP, but what this entry is referring to are the more modern iterations that are specifically marketed toward audiophiles. These devices can play high bitrate files and generally are designed to sound better than most other players. Basically, think of these devices as like an iPod on steroids. Though, yes, iPods are technically DAPs also. Many of them often run Android and can act like a phone that doesn't call or text and just plays music. This is my Surfan's F28 DAP that has its own bespoke UI, and it sounds great. One of the reasons people might choose to have a DAP over using streaming is people might want a device that plays music without an internet connection. Plus, owning music files means you don't have to worry about licensing issues causing random songs on your playlist to suddenly disappear. Pad swapping. This entry refers to the practice of changing the pads on a headphone to improve comfort and/or sound quality. The pads on a headphone actually make a huge impact on a headphone's tuning, so changing them can actually make a significant difference in sound quality. Soundstage. Soundstage is a headphone or IEM's ability to create the sensation that music is being played from a distance. Rather than call it soundstage, I've seen some other headphone reviewers and hobbyists refer to it as the spaciousness effect. Some headphones are particularly good at replicating a recording in a way that makes it sound really spacious. People often describe these headphones as sounding wide. The AKG K702 and the Sennheiser HD800 are examples of headphones that sound really wide, almost like you're listening to a pair of speakers. Headphones that don't sound as spacious, like the Sennheiser HD600, are typically described as sounding narrow or intimate. Soundstage is really fun, and while I prefer a wide soundstage, I know there's plenty of people out there who prefer headphones that sound really close. Imaging. Imaging is the ability of a headphone, IEM, or speaker to convey positional information. Basically, it can give the listener the feeling that instruments in the recording are coming from different locations. Headphones that have both really good imaging and soundstage are super cool. Again, AKG K702s and Sennheiser HD800s are great at it. DankPods often describes it as being like VR for your ears, which is honestly a good description. Like, good imaging and soundstage can actually make you feel as though you're sitting in the room with the musicians. Sennheiser HD600. The HD600 is a headphone manufactured by Sennheiser, which first released in 1997, and it's become a staple in both studios and among all kinds of music listeners. It's perhaps Sennheiser's most famous headphone. It's a very well-regarded headphone that's known for having great performance all across the board. It has a very well-tuned frequency response and a very rich and natural sound quality. Over the years, Sennheiser has released other variants in the HD600 lineup, such as the HD650, HD6XX, and the HD660S2. They all have similar yet slightly different tunings, but overall, pretty much the same performance. I own an HD6XX, and this headphone sounds absolutely incredible. In the audiophile hobby, the HD600 is kind of known as being the audio referee because of its neutral sound profile and its just natural sound. It's often used as a reference or comparison for other headphones. It normally retails for about $300 US and is often compared to high-end audio equipment that's a lot more expensive. The HD600 is often touted as being one of the best sounding headphones ever made. It just makes this headphone the de facto reference for comparing gear. r/headphones, the subreddit for headphones. You can go there if you want to. but it's Reddit, so proceed with caution. Sound is just preference. This entry is referring to members of the hobby who don't see audio equipment as sounding objectively good or bad, and tend to not regard the objective measurements very highly and just kinda opt to listen to whatever they like. This is a perfectly valid way of listening, as this hobby is about the enjoyment of listening to music, and that's entirely based on preference. Though there are people in this hobby who are really into objective measurements and will debate with the subjectivists about what does and doesn't sound good until the end of time. To be honest, I think both the subjective and objective aspects of this hobby are important, but ultimately, your experience in this hobby is entirely up to you, and how much you feel like spending. DAX. DAC stands for Digital to Analog Converter. It's a processor that takes the code of the audio file you're listening to and converts it into an analog signal that can travel along a wire. Every device that plays digital music has a DAC in it. Your smartphone has a DAC, your PC has a DAC, and many external headphone amps are actually amp-DAC combos. Again, the Apple dongle, that's got a DAC. Better DACs can actually offer increased performance for better sound quality, and like headphone amps, you can also get external DACs. Another term people often use instead of DAC is the word preamp, but they basically do the same thing. Sibilants. Sibilants are frequencies from the s, sh, ch, z, and t sounds from human speech. If a headphone has a frequency response with a lot of treble, these sounds can come across as sounding harsh or piercing, and perhaps metallic or even grainy. People often describe this harshness as sounding sibilant. Audio Science Review. AudioscienceReview.com is a popular online forum for people who are into hi-fi to discuss home audio headphones and various other topics related to the audiophile hobby. Tier 3. This is the tier for the more regular members of the hobby. By this point, you may have a few pairs of headphones and perhaps even an external DAC or amp, or just a really solid pair of headphones and an external DAC that you do all your listening with. Mid-fi hell. So mid-fi is a class of headphones or IEMs that fall within a certain price range, which many people will say is from like $200 to $1,000 US. These are considered to be very good, but not at the very top end of the hobby. However, the price of a headphone doesn't necessarily determine how good it sounds. There are headphones that cost $200 that sound just as good as headphones that cost $1,200. This hobby can get very expensive, and for a lot of people, spending over $1,000 on a headphone just isn't worth it. Mid-fi hell just refers to people who are kinda stuck, or for whatever reason prefer to buy mid-fi headphones because they can't justify spending the crazy money for stuff at the super top end, which is, you know, most people. Z Reviews. Z Reviews is a YouTube channel run by a guy who goes by Zeos Pantera online. He makes review videos about headphones, in-ear monitors, and headphone amplifiers. The format of his videos is largely unedited reviews shot in a first-person perspective from a camera mounted on top of a headband or a hat. He's kind of a controversial reviewer, as his opinions tend to be a little inconsistent. You know, he'll often say he loves a pair of headphones in an initial review, only to say in later reviews that that headphone sounds terrible. He can also be something of a contrarian, as he often has opinions that differ vastly from what other reviewers are saying. I remember when the Moondrop Joker dropped, he probably had the only positive review of that headphone that I saw. He also tends to just have a lot of overwhelmingly positive reviews, even for headphones that most audiophiles think don't sound very good. So I've seen a lot of people straight up just accuse him of being a shill. One thing I do have to say I kind of like about him is he seems to not care about frequency response at all, which is in contrast to other audio YouTubers. So his reviews are solely his subjective opinions. One thing I also noticed in his videos is sometimes he'll do this thing where he plugs the device he's listening to into every single amplifier on his desk and then gives it a short listen in quick succession, and I think this is hilarious for some reason. Though he is pretty knowledgeable about amplifiers, so if you need information about an amp, you can trust that what he says about amplifiers is accurate. He has a pretty big following, as his viewers seem to really like his personality. He's kinda loud, tends to use a lot of cuss words in his reviews, and he's very blunt, which for some people make him very fun to watch. He's a pretty charismatic guy, and I do admit he is entertaining. He also is really into anime, and he usually has like waifu wallpapers on his Patreon available for download, so you know, that's pretty neat. You can also see these same risque wallpapers prominently featured in many of his videos. Chi-Fi. A slight adjustment to the term hi-fi, Chi-Fi refers to audiophile brands from China. Chi-Fi brands have gotten really popular within the last 3 years in particular, as many Chinese-made in-ear monitors are very affordable and high quality. This propelled them to popularity. Some famous Chi-Fi brands include Moondrop, Fio, and KZ. Chi-Fi used to refer to any random no-name audio product that was made in China, but as we've seen, there are reputable brands from China making quality products. Again, just do your research before buying any product. Planar magnetic drivers. A planar magnetic driver is a type of transducer that produces sound waves that can be found in some headphones. It operates differently from a dynamic driver. An electromagnet array is placed on one or both sides of a thin membrane that has copper wire tracers on it that zigzags back and forth. When voltage is applied to the magnets, they cause the membrane with the copper tracers on it to vibrate at a very fast speed, thus creating sound waves. These driver types have a noticeable difference in sound quality from dynamic drivers. They tend to have a bit of an edge to their sound, as well as just sounding really fast and energetic. Another advantage to planar magnetic drivers is their bass extension. Open-back planar drivers tend to have a better bass extension than dynamic driver open-back headphones, though this isn't always the case. Calling a planar driver better than a dynamic driver also doesn't feel right. They just have a different vibe to their sound than dynamic drivers, and many people prefer one over the other. I love my HiFiMan Edition XS, and I love my Sennheiser HD6XX, but both of these headphones sound very different from one another, and I wouldn't call one better than the other. They just have different strengths and weaknesses. Endgame. The term endgame in audiophile circles typically means a point at which an audio enthusiast has become satisfied with their collection of audio equipment and no longer feels the need to make another purchase. That point will differ from person to person, but a lot of headphones people consider to be endgame headphones are usually really expensive, but some people are also cursed and will continue buying audio gear forever and will never be satisfied. Tidal. Tidal is a music streaming service similar to Spotify or Apple Music, which was launched in 2014 by Norwegian-Swedish developer Aspiro. However, unlike Spotify, Tidal offers the streaming of lossless audio tracks. Tidal used to have a really clunky UI and wasn't very good at giving personalized recommendations, but in 2024, this is no longer the case. Tidal's UI has improved a lot since its creation, and its recommendation algorithm is on par with that of Spotify. It's a really great service with a massive library of lossless files to listen to, so if you're curious about it, I recommend getting a subscription. Apple Music now also offers lossless streaming, but Tidal was kind of the first major streaming platform to have it. Bass bloat and shout. There are many aspects of the frequency response that can make a headphone speaker or in-ear monitor sound bad, and two very notable ones are bass bloat and shout. Bass bloat happens when the frequency response has too much mid to high bass. This is kind of known as like the muddiness region. A rise in this region can make bass hits and low instruments a lot more prominent and impactful, as well as adding a warm presentation to the sound profile. However, if this rises too much, it can cause the sound to become muddy or muffled, and the bass frequencies will cover up the sound of other instruments in the recording. Bass bloat, if it gets to be too much, can absolutely ruin songs. Shout happens when there's too much emphasis placed in the upper mid-range. Too much emphasis in the upper mid-range creates a very unnatural sound to vocals and higher instruments that's a little hard to describe with words, but you'll know it when you hear it. It just kind of doesn't sound good and sounds a little bit harsh and unpleasant. Qobuz is a very similar service to Tidal. It's another streaming app that has lossless audio tracks. However, unlike Tidal, you can actually purchase digital files to download them DRM-free, so you can just kind of have that file forever, basically. I buy all of my FLACs and lossless audio tracks from Qobuz. It's a really good service. Audeze. Audeze is an audio brand from California who primarily manufacture planar magnetic headphones. Audeze made a name for themselves as being one of the first companies to utilize planar magnetic technology since their founding in 2008. Today, they make some very high-end headphones that are well regarded as some of the best on the market, with the LCD2 and LCD-X being a couple of their most well-known and well-liked models. Tube amps. Tube amps are a type of speaker and headphone amplifier that operate with the use of vacuum tubes. Two electrical components known as a cathode and an anode interact in a vacuum tube in order to generate enough voltage to power a headphone or speaker. Tube amps are known for having a much warmer sound compared to a solid-state amp. A really powerful combo in the audiophile hobby is a tube amp like the Little Dot Mark II and the Sennheiser HD600 or HD6XX. A lot of people seem to really like that amp and headphone combo together. I've yet to own a tube amp myself, but I have tried one and I will say they're pretty cool. The vibe kinda has that same old school analog sound that really reminds me of vinyl. The Harman target. The Harman target is a frequency response target curve developed by electronics company Harman International. Remember in the frequency response entry, I talked about how frequency response is usually represented by a graph that looks like this? The Harman target is a target curve which, according to Harman, is the most pleasing frequency response to the majority of people. Basically, a flat frequency response allows listeners to hear everything that happens in a recording, but most people find perfectly flat tuning kinda boring. The Harman target is one such tuning that aims to be balanced yet colored enough so that the majority of listeners will find it enjoyable. There's a few different iterations of the Harman target, but typically it consists of a boosted sub-bass region, followed by a tuck in the high bass to low mids, and then a raised upper mid-range and lower treble. Not everyone is a fan of this frequency response, but I do think that this tuning does sound good. It's pleasing and inoffensive. If you own a pair of Samsung Galaxy Buds, these are actually tuned to the Harman target. So if you like the sound of your Galaxy Buds, you probably enjoy this tuning. Or maybe you haven't heard any other style of tuning, I don't know. There's way more to the Harman target than I can talk about in this video. There's so much research that was done that ultimately led to the Harman target's creation, and there's a lot that I simply do not have time to talk about. You could probably write an entire book about all the research that was done. This is just a very basic description. One thing I notice is there seems to be a lot of audiophiles who are strictly opposed to the Harman target, and many brands are shifting away from tuning their headphones to the Harman target within this past year. It seems like the general vibe in the community is that there are a lot of people who are just getting tired of it, especially within the IEM community, as there's a lot of devices that have this tuning and people just want something different, which I totally understand. That being said, I still think Harman sounds good, but it may not be your cup of tea. Though, according to Harman's research, there's a high likelihood that you will actually enjoy this sound. Headphone modders. Modders exist everywhere. Whereas some people like to modify cars, some people in the audiophile hobby like to mod headphones. The mods can range from really simple, such as a pad swap or adding a headband for more cushioning, to some more complicated mods like adding a detachable cable, to complete overhauls of the headphone. Grado headphones are actually a really popular headphone in the modder space because of their ease of access. I mean, they're basically just a housing for the driver with no ear cups. If you're interested in modding headphones, I highly recommend checking out Custom Cans on YouTube. Slam. Slam is also referred to as punch or impact. Essentially, it refers to how audible an impact is in a recording. It's often associated with low drums like bass drums, low toms, and timpani. Having a subtle increase in the mid-bass and increase in the sub-bass can contribute to a greater sensation of slam. If the slam is great enough, the listener can actually feel the vibrations produced by the recording rather than just hearing them. It's almost like the equivalent of being near a really low and loud car subwoofer. It's really fun in my opinion, though it's not everybody's cup of tea. Buying anything other than a shit stack for an HD600. So shit, that's spelled SCHIIT, is a company that manufactures external DACs and amplifiers for speakers and headphones. There's a really popular affordable DAC and amp combo that they manufacture that people often refer to as a shit stack, which is made up of their Magni and Modi models. So the HD600 has a high impedance of 300 ohms, but despite that, most entry-level amplifiers can power the HD600 no problem, so you don't need a super powerful amp to run the HD600. I'm not sure what the big deal is about running it on anything other than a shit stack, but this Iceberg beam did come from r/headphones, so it's possible that this is just an opinion that's popular on r/headphones, or maybe the user who created this Iceberg in particular is just really opinionated. I don't know. Or maybe the meme is that the HD600 just sounds particularly great from a shit stack, but you know, you can use whatever sounds good and can power the HD600. As long as it can power the HD600 and has the features that you want, I mean, go for it. I run everything out of my iFi Zen DAC V2, and it serves me pretty well. Biodyna Cult. Biodynamic drivers are a specific type of dynamic drive which has a membrane made out of a material called biocellulose. This material offers a wider range of motion and typically gives headphones a lot of bass. These types of drivers are commonly found in headphones made by a company called Fostex. This This entry refers to people who are really big fans of this type of driver, and they often act as though being a fan of this driver is some type of religion, hence the name of the entry. Timbre. I know this isn't a super common word, but it gets under my skin to see people pronouncing it wrong. It's called timbre. Timbre refers to a sound's unique quality or characteristics that are distinct from volume and pitch. For example, a brass instrument has a very distinct sound quality from a string instrument. This sound quality is known as timbre. Audiophile Discord servers. This entry is exactly what it sounds like. They're Discord servers for audiophiles to discuss various topics of the hobby. I'm in the headphones.com server and the DankPod server. There's some pretty cool people there. Check these servers out if you're interested in joining the discussion. Getting banned from HPHQ. HPHQ stands for Headphone Headquarters. It's an audio Discord server made up of a lot of people who also frequent r/headphones. For a while, this Discord server was kind of the Wild West, and bans on this server were frequent. There are a lot of people who just like to go into the server to troll, as well as mods who like to ban people who are generally acting unproblematic for seemingly the smallest infractions or for just no reason at all. Though in the past couple years, that chaos has mostly subsided and the server is a lot more relaxed now. Hi-Fi-Man. Hi-Fi-Man is a manufacturer of planar magnetic headphones from China. They were first founded in 2007, and before they released their first pair of headphones, they actually released this, a high-resolution music player called the HM801. Later, they'd go on to make some of the most popular planar magnetic headphones on the market, the HE400i, the Sundara, and the Aria, just to name a few. They're all really fantastic sounding headphones. However, Hi-Fi-Man is also known for having not the greatest build quality. They can be a little rickety, and screws and bushings can sometimes fall out. I've actually experienced the falling out screws issue on my Edition XS, and it was pretty annoying to deal with. I still have that issue sometimes. It sounds incredible though, and they're more comfortable and better designed than Grados, though that's not exactly a high bar to clear. But yeah, Hi-Fi-Man is a chi-fi brand that's really popular among audiophiles. Macro dynamics. Macro dynamics are the broad changes in volume that take place in a song. Loud passages that feature a lot of drums and cymbals, as well as drastic crescendos in music, are considered a part of macro dynamics. Micro dynamics are the small changes in volume in a song. They tend to focus on the smaller, less obvious details of the recording. Though in the audiophile space, you might hear the word dynamics get thrown around a lot, and it seems that audiophiles can't really seem to agree what exactly dynamics are, but usually in music terminology, dynamics refers to changes in volume. Bluetooth audio codecs. Bluetooth audio codecs are basically the method that a device uses to wirelessly send information to the Bluetooth device you're listening to. Different Bluetooth codecs are able to transmit different amounts of information, and certain codecs are only compatible with some devices. Some Bluetooth codecs include aptX, LDAC, and AAC. Digital information is transmitted as bits. The higher the bit rate, the more information is able to be sent. Different Bluetooth codecs basically are able to transmit different amounts of bits at any given time. So, some codecs may sound better than others because they can send more or less information. That's a very simple explanation of it. This is my last purchase for a while. There are people in this hobby who get super into it and they amass a collection of audio gear. And often, this is my last purchase for a while is typically said as a cope by someone who has a crippling addiction to spending money for more equipment, as they will inevitably buy a new piece of gear soon after saying that phrase. Hi-Fi Shark. Hi-Fi Shark is a website that basically searches for listings on used audio gear from around the internet, usually amplifiers and speakers. It's not a store, rather it's just a search engine for current listings of used gear. It's a good way to save money if you're in the market for used hi-fi. Electrostatic drivers. Electrostatic drivers are a type of transducer that can be found in loudspeakers and some headphones. The first electrostatic loudspeaker was patented by a man named Arthur Jansen in 1953 and was originally developed for the United States Navy for the purposes of targeting torpedoes. The first electrostatic headphones wouldn't be developed until 1959 by Japanese electronics brand Stax. Electrostatic drivers operate through the use of a very thin membrane, typically made of polyester film, that's coated in an electrical conductive material. On both sides of the membrane are two perforated metal plates that look like grids known as stators. A very high voltage is run to the plates. When an audio signal is applied, the voltage moves back and forth between the two metal plates, which bends the membrane in between them, producing vibrations, and thus sound. There are a few advantages of this driver type. This sound tends to be very detailed and have very little harmonic distortion. One common drawback is that electrostatic headphones are often lacking in bass. Another drawback is that they require a lot of power to operate. You can't just plug most electrostatic headphones into a headphone jack and have it work. A lot of these models require the use of an energizer, which has to be wired into a full-blown speaker amplifier. You need a dedicated room in your house to use them. And though people who own electrostats will say they're totally worth the hassle and setup. I've always wanted to try electrostats, but sadly I haven't had a chance to. Stax is still making electrostatic headphones today, with the Stax Lambda being one of their most well-known models. Balanced memes. I have no idea what this entry is referring to, and every time I try to Google it, I just end up getting that one Thanos meme where he's like perfectly balanced, as all things should be. But if anyone in the comments has any idea what this entry is referring to, let me know. Tier 4. This is the tier for people who are really into the hobby. Like, if you're in layer 4, everything I've said before are things you probably already know, and you may have amassed just a large collection of gear by this point. Dan Clark Audio. Dan Clark Audio is an audio brand based out of San Diego, California, and was founded in 2012 by Dan Clark. Originally, the company was called Mr. Speakers before changing the name to Dan Clark Audio in 2019. Today, they're primarily known for making some very high-end planar magnetic headphones. According to their website, Dan Clark became interested in audio at a very young age, and he received his MBA in engineering from San Jose State University and Apple Computers, though the website doesn't say exactly when he received his MBA. He spent the 90s working as a loudspeaker design consultant for several electronics companies, and even helped to design the Platinum Audio 2 series. According to the DCA website, in the 2000s, with the advent of the iPod and other similar portable listening devices, he became interested in making headphones. In 2008, he started modifying headphones for his own personal use, which eventually led him to founding Mr. Speakers in 2012. His goal was to design closed-back headphones to have the same spacious sound that open-back headphones have. He released a headphone known as the Mr. Speakers Alpha Dog, which is actually a modified version of the Fostex T50RP headphones, and they were a pretty big hit. Dan Clark then used the revenue from the Alpha Dog sales to fund his first fully in-house built headphones, known as the Mr. Speakers Ether. After that, his company went on to produce more models of planar magnetic closed-back headphones, and eventually became the Dan Clark Audio company that we know today. One thing to note is that Dan Clark himself seems to be really receptive to user feedback. About 5 years ago, I saw that he did a Reddit AMA, and it seemed to go pretty well. He gave all kinds of details about how his headphones are tested and built, as well as noting customer feedback and wants. I'll go ahead and link the thread in the description for those who are interested. Burn-in. So there's a process that some audiophile brands and hobbyists recommend people do before using their headphones, called burn-in. And basically, the concept is the same as breaking in a new pair of shoes. The idea is that you play some white noise through the headphones for a number of hours before listening to loosen up internal components so that your headphones or speakers or IEMs sound their best. There are people who absolutely swear by this. However, there's little to no evidence to suggest that burn-in actually has any effect on overall sound quality. What's most likely happening is that people are either getting used to the sound of their headphones over time, or it's simply a placebo effect. You can burn in your headphones if you want to, however, it's not likely to make a significant difference in sound. If you bought your headphone, you can listen to it right away and the frequency response will pretty much never change. Things like the pads wearing in over time can change the sound, but burn-in is still highly debated whether or not it actually does something. If you bought a headphone you don't like, I would recommend just returning it instead of burning it in and trying to make it work. I understand wanting to get your money's worth, but I don't think it's really worth it if you have to force yourself to like something you just don't like. Personally, I really like Crinical's theory of headphone burn-in being invented by audiophile brands in order to make people miss their return window. I won't tell you not to burn in your headphones, you know, because there are some people who swear it makes a difference, but I'm saying there's also no evidence to support doing it, so just do whatever you want. Failed headphones. Not every headphone that releases is successful. Some headphones, for one reason or another, don't catch on. Even legendary audio brands like Sennheiser have made some headphones that have flopped, such as their HD820 and HD700 models. The HD820 came out in the summer of 2018 and was notable for being Sennheiser's first flagship closed-back headphones. Reviewers loved it for its excellent build quality and comfort, but sadly, where it fell behind was sound quality. It was known for for having a quite exaggerated V-shape that left a really thin sounding mid-range. It had too much bass bloat and a quite unpleasant treble response. The HD820 released with a price tag of roughly $2,500 US, which made it not worth it even for seasoned hobbyists for how it was tuned. The idea was to make a closed-back version of the HD800S, which is famous for its resolution and incredibly wide soundstage. They wanted the isolation of a closed-back headphone with the famous soundstage of the HD800S. While the HD820 was great for instrument separation, detail, and soundstage, sadly the janky tuning put a lot of people off. Combine that with how expensive it was, and you got a headphone that just doesn't sell well. The HD820 sadly has been discontinued. Another Sennheiser flop was the HD700, which was released in fall 2012, though today there seems to be a lot more love for the HD700 than when it was first released. It was originally released at $1,000 US, and because it was rare in 2012 for headphones to release with such a hefty price tag, it was very heavily scrutinized. So what was wrong with the HD700? It was very resolving, very detailed, and had a wide soundstage that was comparable to the HD800, but the tuning was also not very good. Its treble was way too harsh, and this put off a lot of potential buyers. The treble was simply too unpleasant for the majority of people. Low sales eventually led Sennheiser marking down the price of the HD700 to $500, but even that wasn't enough to turn things around. Sadly, this was discontinued too and is one of the rarest modern Sennheiser headphones that you can find. Speaker amped HE6. The HE6 is a planar magnetic headphone that was made by Hi-Fiman that is notoriously difficult to power. This entry is basically just saying that in order to power the HE6, you need a powerful speaker amp, which isn't necessarily true, but you will need a beefier amp. Hi-Fiman QC. Hi-Fiman, despite being popular, is also known for having a fairly high amount of quality control issues. These range from issues with the build quality to driver failures, broken wires, stuff like that. I've seen a few different statistics for how high the failure rate is, and I've seen anywhere from 16% to 30% of new units having issues, which is pretty significant. However, I will say that I own two Hi-Fiman headphones, and both of them are still in perfect working order. Don't be scared to buy Hi-Fiman headphones if you're interested in them. Just keep in mind there's a non-zero chance you may get a bad one, and be prepared to exchange it. Bear's Remorse. I wasn't totally sure what this entry was referring to. At first, my best guess was just being a play on words of Bear Dynamic and Buyer's Remorse. You know, maybe the person who made this iceberg just isn't a fan of Bear Dynamic and is expressing that they regret getting a Bear Dynamic headphone. But then I found this image, which took me to /HPG, which is the 4chan board for headphones and IEMs. My guess is maybe Bear's Remorse is some kind of meme that is/was circulated on the board. You know, maybe people on the board just don't like Bear Dynamic. I didn't spend too much time on the board. You know, I didn't really spend enough time on there to get a feel for what the vibe was. But I mean, it's 4chan, so there's bound to be some degenerate shit on there. Maybe. But from what I saw, though, the discussion seemed pretty tame and mostly constructive. Soundburger. This is an entry that I added. The Soundburger is a portable vinyl record player made by Japanese audio company Audio-Technica. It's a really neat little record player that has a compact size and can also transmit vinyl playback over Bluetooth, which I think is objectively really cool. The reason I put it on this iceberg is because it's called the Soundburger, and I think that's funny. Abyss Audio. Abyss Audio is an audio brand from the United States that's known for making luxury headphones that are very expensive, with their cheapest model being the Abyss Diana MR, which retails for about $3,000 US. They're generally known for sounding very good and being very comfortable. Most Abyss models use planar magnetic drivers, with their most expensive model being the $10,000 planar headphone, the Abyss 1266. Anecdotes from those who have tried it hold it in high regard for being one of the best sounding headphones on the market. Also, fun fact, DMS, a YouTuber we discussed earlier, is a former employee of Abyss Audio. Tube rolling. Remember when we talked about tube amps earlier? Well, the tubes on the amp can actually be replaced. Tube rolling is simply the practice of swapping out the tubes on a tube amp. Changing the tubes on the amp can result in the sound of the amp changing. Focal customer service. Focal is an audio brand from France known for their speakers and headphones. They're also notorious for having just abysmal customer service. I've been reading some horror stories, and common themes are taking forever to respond, to simply ignoring the issues or blaming customers for driver failures, or even feigning ignorance about well-known issues and design flaws. I saw one screenshot on Reddit where a customer emailed Focal customer service about a Focal Clear they bought that they had a problem with the headband with, but it was still under warranty. And Focal responded by saying basically, "The Clear is discontinued, so we can't help you. We have a new model called the Clear MG. You should consider buying one. And that was it. There's a lot of stories like that. I asked the headphones.com Discord server if anyone had any experience with Focal customer service, and one user replied to me with a story. A friend of his bought a defective Focal Batiste. He sent it into Focal for repair, waited 9 months, and then when he got it back, it was still broken. Focal headphones tend to be on the expensive side, so I'd be absolutely furious if anything like this happened to me. During my research on the headphones.com Discord server, one user suggested that if you have an issue with your Focals, to just go through the vendor you bought it from instead of contacting Focal. And for legal reasons, I just want to say that these are all isolated incidents. I'm not gonna say anything good or bad about customer service from Focal. This is all just stuff that I've heard / seen on the internet. This is purely based on opinion, not fact. Cursed DIY projects. There's people in this hobby who want to DIY their own sets of headphones, and that's pretty cool. Building your own headphones and headphone accessories is a skill, and personally, it sounds hard. But sometimes DIY projects come out looking really cursed. This can just be due to inexperience or people who just want to make something cursed. I'm a big fan of this user on Reddit who goes by PudJam667. His DIY projects are simultaneously cursed and hilarious. I'm a big fan of these giant horn headphones he made. Look at these. These are ridiculous. Tier 5. I don't know how to describe this tier, other than this is like the meme tier. Like, some of these entries in this tier make absolutely no sense or aren't about any specific brand, person, or item in particular. Let's finish the video, man. Every LCDX is personalized. So this is a callback to a meme that originated on 4chan. There's a meme on 4chan about how every copy of Super Mario 64 is personalized. Basically, a spooky urban legend about the game in which players would experience weird and creepy things happening throughout the game that would only happen to them and no other players. And it eventually led to people creating all kinds of spooky conspiracy theories about the game. Since this meme started to circulate, the every copy of X is personalized became an entry on numerous iceberg charts as like a callback to the original Super Mario 64 meme. The Audeze LCD-X is a planar magnetic headphone made by Audeze that is a pretty damn great headphone, although I'm personally not aware of any spooky properties or stories surrounding it. It's just a headphone. Though, if anyone has a scary story about the Audeze LCD-X, leave a comment below. I'd like to know. Maybe I'll talk about it in a future vid. Using open bag headphones in public. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Open bag headphones bleed noise like crazy, and you will annoy the piss out of people around you because they can hear your music. Just don't do it. If I catch you using open bag headphones in public, I will kick you in the junk. Buying better cables for better sound. Lots of nicer headphones made for audiophiles and studio use have interchangeable cables, and there's a few reasons you might want to change your cable. Nicer cables are more durable and more ergonomic. Plus, you can swap the cable for one that's compatible with a balanced output jack or a XLR port, but upgrading your cable won't necessarily change the sound of your headphones. There's some evidence to suggest that more expensive and nicer cables can have minimal effects on changing the frequency response of your headphones. However, the difference is so minimal that 99% of people won't notice it at all. And the people who buy $100 audio cables claiming it makes the sound better are likely just coping. Look here, these are two different cables that I have for my CCA, RCA in-ear monitors. One cable is the stock cable that came with them, and one is an upgraded aftermarket cable. The upgraded aftermarket cable feels way nicer, but both of these cables sound exactly the same. No, you don't need to spend an insane amount on an aftermarket cable, but you can if you want to. Just don't expect it to sound different. DSD. DSD is a high-resolution audio format trademarked by Sony and Philips that was developed in the mid-1990s for encoding digital tracks onto super audio CDs. The purpose for DSD originally was to remaster old analog tracks into high quality. The difference between DSD and FLAC and WAV files is that FLAC and WAV files use a format called PCM. PCM works by taking a series of samples, typically 44,100 samples per second, which describes what amplitude the waveform should be at a specific point in time, and then basically connecting the dots between the samples to create the original waveform of the recording. The closer the samples are together, the higher the frequencies that can be played back. PCM is the most common format of digital playback. The way DSD works is each sample is the equivalent of 1 bit. DSD does not work by describing where the waveform is at any given time. Instead, each bit is valued at either maximum or minimum, and basically pulses are used to determine how high or low the waveform is. I'm getting this information from Golden Sound. Please go check him out. He's incredibly knowledgeable, way more knowledgeable than me, in fact. But the analogy that Golden golden news is that DSD is like playing Flappy Bird. You have to keep the bird flying through the pipes, and in order to do that, you have to tap the screen to increase the bird's altitude or not tap to let him fall. Think of each tap as being a pulse. The more pulses, the higher the waveform, and the less pulses, the lower the waveform. So basically, PCM and DSD are two different ways that code is utilized to play digital media, and they work differently. Which one sounds better? I personally don't know, but I use PCM for basically everything. I don't own any Super Audio CDs, and I don't have a way to play them back. I do have regular CDs though. Hey guys, I'm looking for a good headphone for gaming. My budget is $2,000. Yes, that's the name of this entry. I think what this is referring to is people who aren't knowledgeable in the hobby and just want a quick recommendation. So they'll join a forum or Discord server and ask something along the lines of, hey guys, I'm looking for a good headphone for gaming. My budget is $2,000, and they're usually expecting a quick and easy answer only to find out that audio is a lot more complicated than they originally anticipated. And this does happen a lot if you hang out in audio forums and Discord servers. As you might have guessed if you made it this far in the iceberg, there's a lot to consider when choosing headphones, IEMs, or speakers. But I'll save you a bit of time if you are one of these people looking for a recommendation. The best way to decide what to get is to try stuff. Trying stuff will help you figure out what you like and what you don't like. You can watch a million YouTube video reviews on pieces of gear and have as many perspectives as possible, but you won't actually know what you like until you start trying stuff. Ideally, if you want to try something, check out your local audio store or check out a Can Jam and ask to demo some stuff. But you can also buy a piece of gear, and if you like it, great! If not, you can return it or sell it and try something else. Asking around is also a great thing to do, and the fact that you're asking people in the first place is great. It's really cool to see people being curious about the hobby. But we just ask that you do a bit of research first before entering one of these spaces and asking for a recommendation with nothing to go off of. There are just certain questions seasoned hobbyists hear a lot and might be tired of answering. So we do appreciate it when newbies enter this space with some kind of idea of what to look for in advance. Nothing wrong with asking questions, just please try doing a bit of research on your own first. On the other hand, one thing I am tired of seeing in this community is the hostility I see some people have for newcomers. If you're new to the hobby, please know that most of us are chill, and don't let the ultra hardcore sweats chase you off. I promise, we don't bite. Music choice solely dictated by bitrate. Again, I'm pretty sure this is another shitpost entry, but remember when I talked about bitrates earlier as part of the Flax entry? Basically, this is just referring to people who only listen to music if it's at a high bitrate and sample rate, which would limit them to certain genres of music. I'm not sure if there's too many people out there who actually listen like this. Again, I'm pretty sure this is a joke, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are people who legitimately listen to music this way. Roon. Roon is a music management service that takes all your music that you both own and your music library from Tidal or Qobuz and organizes it all into one application. Basically, on top of paying for your music streaming services and owned music files, this is an additional music service that organizes all your music for you. Though that description is kind of doing it a disservice, as it is pretty cool, even though it is expensive and, in my opinion, is kind of overpriced. Roon has a few nice features that make it more than just a gimmick though. One of the first being its extensive biography feature that not only displays the artist's history and discography, but also collaborations they've done, producers they've worked with, and relationships with other artists. Roon basically uses this biography system to suggest other music you might like. On top of that, Roon also has its own EQ and is compatible with numerous DSP plugins. The way the app works is you need a central hub, which Roon calls a core, to run the app, usually a computer, and from that core you can send the Roon playback to other wireless devices you have around the house, which Roon calls endpoints. So if you have a DAC or amp that's compatible with Bluetooth, Roon can send the playback to that device. Roon also sells its own piece of hardware called the Nucleus that basically just runs the Roon application if you don't have a device that's capable of running the Roon app or transmitting a wireless signal. But, I'm gonna be real here, these devices are hella expensive. The base model, the Nucleus 1, is $500, which is a steep price to pay for a plastic box with fake heat sinks that's designed to just run one app. They also have the Nucleus Titan, which, at the time of this recording, costs $3,600? Huh? Yeah, no thanks! Okay, like, I don't know what features the Titan has over the Nucleus One, but there's no way it's a $3,100 difference. Why is this one so much more expensive than the base model? I can see Rune being really useful for people who have extensive music libraries and a house full of hi-fi gear and they want something that can just send their music wherever throughout the house. But this service is really expensive. Keep in mind that the software itself is a subscription model with a monthly fee that's more expensive than both Tidal and Qobuz. Keep in mind you can create your own wireless playback system without Rune for much cheaper, but it may require a lot more setup. Rune is more expensive, but it's also more convenient. I like the idea of Rune, but honestly it's just way too expensive for me. Beat up headphones selling on eBay. If you go to eBay right now and search for headphones, you'll find a lot of entries for headphones that are clearly heavily used. Prices for these headphones vary from model to model and seller to seller, but I mean, it's eBay. Of course, some used gear is going to be more worn out than others. To be honest, I kind of like seeing these kinds of listings because it sort of reminds me of the old days of eBay, where the website used to be this gigantic online garage sale where you could get some legitimately amazing deals on all kinds of products. But now there's a lot of online stores that sell their wares on eBay, and deciphering which listings are real and which ones are fake is such a pain in the ass. Still, don't be afraid to buy used equipment. Sometimes an old headphone still works great and is still comfortable, but the damage is purely cosmetic. I bought my Sony MDR7506 off of eBay for just $50, and they sound incredible. Owning a $2,000 plus headphone. Yes, headphones can get crazy expensive, and some hobbyists save up money to purchase the gear that's at the very top end. To some people, it's 100% worth it. I personally would love to own something like the Meze Empyrean 2 or the Modhouse Tungsten. These get expensive by sounding as good as they can without sacrificing build quality or comfort. Often they use expensive materials to be as comfortable as possible, last as long as possible, and sound as good as possible. Like the Meze Empyrean earpads are made from Alcantara, which is the same material Lamborghini uses for their interiors. But I also own a Sennheiser HD6XX, which is the headphone that I use the most, and for $200, it's insane how goddamn good this thing sounds. You don't need to spend crazy money to have amazing sound quality. There's entire systems you can buy for only a couple $100. If you want some recommendations on budget-friendly audio systems for your PC, check out Josh Valor on YouTube. He's got a few great videos breaking down the components of different audio systems at different price points. Sennheiser HE1. The Sennheiser HE1 is the single most expensive headphone system in the world. Have you ever wanted to buy a headphone that costs twice the price of a new Toyota Camry? Congratulations, the HE1 comes in at an eye-watering $64,000 US. The HE1 is an electrostatic headphone that comes with a 500-watt amp. That's a lot of power. This headphone is truly an engineering marvel. In addition to the headphone, it comes with this overly engineered base station that includes a DAC and amp with dials to manually EQ the frequency response. I mean, look at this thing. Look at the startup sequence that happens when you turn this thing on. The base station housing is made from the same type of marble that was used to sculpt Michelangelo's David. So does it sound good? I mean, a peasant like me has never even been near one, but testimonials I've read regard it as being the greatest sounding headphone that has ever been built. No expense was spared in the design and manufacturing of the HE1. It's what happens when engineers are given unlimited resources and told, make the best headphone system ever. I've seen videos of this thing sounding so good that it brings grown-ass men to tears in mere seconds of listening. I would sell my left nut to try this thing for just 5 minutes. The HE1 is the successor to another headphone known as the Sennheiser Project Orpheus, which hit the market back in 1991, and also was insanely over-engineered and expensive, and came in at a price of $16,000, which still made it the most expensive headphone at the time. The HE1 came out in 2015 and surpassed that price tag. Today, there's only about 300 of these, and most of them are circulated to the convention scene for people to demo. The Apple EarPods are the actual best headphones. This is just objectively true. I know I hyped up the Sennheiser HE1 a lot in the last entry, but what so many audiophiles don't realize is that the Apple EarPods are actually the best headphones ever made, and horrendous? Not even close. I was gonna end the video right after the Sennheiser HE1, but then I remembered, oh shit, I forgot to talk about the Apple EarPods. I basically make sure to mention the EarPods on every video because they're just so good and affordable that really, honestly, they just make every other headphone or IEM irrelevant. And that's it! That's the Audiophile Iceberg. There's some entries on this tier that I just couldn't talk about because they're entirely self-explanatory or just lacking any information that I could find. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for watching this, and if you made it this far in the video, I just want to say you're a real one. If you're just discovering my channel for the first time, I would really appreciate it if you left a like and maybe subscribed. It helps me out a lot. This video has been in the work for a long time, and I'm glad to have finally uploaded it. The audiophile hobby is this huge rabbit hole, and honestly, any one of these entries on this iceberg is worthy of an entire video all on its own. Even if this video doesn't get you interested in the hobby, I do hope at the very least this video inspires you to listen to more music. I'm Tenshin Sound. The video is over. I'm not very good at conclusions. Have a picture of a cat. Okay, bye-bye.